Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our session today. This session's title is There's an Innovator in Everyone, a Panel's Perspective. My name is Mernaz, and I will be the tech help and moderator. Our speakers will introduce themselves and then start the panel. Then we'll have some time at the end for QA. So please put questions in the chat and I will read them out at the end. Also, please note that we will be recording this presentation and an accessible video will be available for viewing on the IT Professionals Conference website, hopefully next week. So you can check that out. And with that, we have an awesome panel today. We have Scott Winger, Al Nemec, Lindsay Boland, Todd Schwanker, Parvat Regmi. And with that, I will turn it over to the panel for their presentation.
Thank you, Mernaz. Hi. Welcome to our panel discussion called There's an Innovator in Everyone. I'm Scott Winger, and I'll be hosting this discussion. I've been an IT technologist here on campus since the summer of '87. I've worn a few hats over the years, as you might expect: sysadmin, netadmin, firewall admin, and now, when I'm having my best days, I'm a help desk analyst who works directly with customers, helping them overcome everyday IT challenges and solve everyday IT problems. That is what I love to do. I love working directly with customers. So why are the panelists and I convening this panel on innovation today? Here's why. As a help desk tech, I speak with a couple hundred customers every year. Cool, right? I love my job. I wouldn't trade it for any other. But the first time I ever talked to panelist Todd Schwanke, wait for the camera, Todd, I walked out of that room inspired. Why? Was it his no-nonsense approach to stating his and his team's really important needs? No. And Todd will tell you more about what he does in a few minutes. I walked out of Todd's office all the way back in '08 inspired because of what he does with tech and the ways he innovates with tech. Yeah. I left that office inspired and super proud to work at UW-Madison because of who Todd is and what Todd does. And then there's panelist Al Nemec. Give us a wave, Al. This guy blew my doors off at last year's Information and Technology Professionals Conference, this conference last year. Why? Because of his quiet, stated, intense expertise with a bolt-on app for WordPress. I was astonished by what Al had taught himself to do with that amazing tool. And I was also very pleased that he was so gracious and humble about sharing what he'd learned with the attendees at that conference. Again, meeting the second of our four panelists for the first time, Al Nemec, left me inspired and proud to work at UW-Madison. And then there's panelist Parvat Regmi. Give us a wave at Parvat. I got connected to Parvat through a mutual colleague who, after discussing the IT training curriculum issues for the custodians here on campus, this colleague simply said, "You need to meet Parvat Regmi." So she connected us, and Parvat and I met online to learn about each other's missions here on campus. And Parvat's dedication, his enthusiasm, his creative input and output for addressing the challenges of helping UW custodians learn as much computing tech as they can. Well, once again, I came out of that meeting inspired and proud to work here at UW. And last but not least, there's panelist Lindsay Boland. You know what to do, Lindsay. Lindsay's a systems person. What do I mean by that? I mean that Lindsay's a systematic thinker. Lindsay's the kind of person who designs systems while people are describing tech challenges. Yeah, check this out. I came across Lindsay while having lunch at a mentoring event last fall. So she and I are sitting at a big table at Union South, and I said, "What do you do, Lindsay?" And she goes, "I'm a Jira admin." And I said, "What's Jira?" And away we went down a Jira rabbit hole where she said a few things that partly sunk in and a few things that partly went over my head. And I said, "So I've got this challenge, blah, 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 blah. Can Jira address that?" And Lindsay goes, "Yep, I mocked up the solution to your challenge in my head while you were speaking." And I, of course, was once again inspired and made proud to work here at UW-Madison. So why are we here today? We're here today because I think that we have a problem. I think we have a problem here at UW-Madison. Here's the problem I'm seeing. The problem is that UW-Madison right now, wonderful, affirming, committed to the Wisconsin idea, committed to the idea that she exists to bring betterment to the entire world. Amazing as she is, she doesn't have enough IT and IT adjacent folks who see themselves as innovators. And that's why we're here today. We're convening a panel called "There's an Innovator in Everyone" because I think we need a tidal wave, a tsunami. We need a couple hundred more get her done innovators just like our panelists here. Yeah. But, and here's the strange part. I firmly believe that this university already has more Lindsays, Parwats, Als, and Todds, and that's why we're here. We're here to help you recognize yourself as an innovator. Further, I hope also that by convening this panel, you'll begin to see your colleagues as innovators too. And that's why I'm excited to be a part of this panel. These four have amazed and inspired me. And my hope is that they'll amaze and inspire you too. So, you want to be an innovator? Yeah? Here's the challenge. Open your mind to what the panelists and the speakers today here at this conference are saying, and begin seeing yourself and your colleagues as innovators. Let's get started. Al, Lindsay, Parwat, and Todd, please tell us a bit about what you do professionally, how long you've been in the business, and a bit about your professional journey.
All right, I will jump in here. I think so. Thank you, Scott, for that introduction, and incredibly gracious of you to highlight that. And like you said, there's just so many more innovators here on this campus. So, what I do professionally, I work as a web operations manager for the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences. I really work there, though, as my primary goal and mission to make sure that we are able to support that college and do whatever we can to give back to the greater campus and offer a greater way for folks to communicate digitally, basically through, in this case, websites, but sometimes other digital mediums as well. There has been a long time coming with things that have developed there. I've been within the College of Ag and Life Sciences, specifically in that sort of position, for about 10 years now. And before that, I've worked in web design, development, user experience spaces, even 7 years prior to that professionally, working in the private sector. So within that space, I've had the opportunity to gain a lot of great insights and perspective, and also learn an absolute ton from a lot of the people that have come before me and that have even more experience than myself. But with that, I would pass the mic on to Parwat, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Al. And thank you, Scott, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Parwat Regmi, and I use he, him, his pronouns. I am an interpreter, translator, and workplace computer trainer in a small but impactful unit within the Office of Human Resources called the Cultural Linguistic Services, or CLS. A few of my colleagues have actually joined us here in the audience today, so thank you so much for your support. I've been working full-time in my role since January of 2020. Before January of 2020, I worked full-time at a local nonprofit and had been freelancing as an interpreter and a translator, mainly at UW-Madison. where I got a chance to get acquainted with some of my current colleagues. One day I showed up at one of my current colleagues' office and showed interest in pursuing my side gig into a full-time position. And that's when the ball really started rolling. And CLS was kind enough to offer me an opportunity as not just an interpreter and translator, but they saw value in me as also someone that could potentially teach computers to employees. And we just started in January 2020, and here we are. And with that, I would like to pass it to Lindsay.
Thanks, Parvat. And thank you, Scott, for all the very nice things you said about us. Really appreciate that. So I'm Lindsay Boland. I work for the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health. I'm the software solutions architect there. And like Scott said, I'm the Jira Cloud administrator for family medicine. I actually started out in social work and always intended to go into social work. But 8 years ago, I was hired at UW-Whitewater as their technology coordinator for Anderson Library because no one there understood how video game consoles worked and happened to be a hobby of mine. After about 4 years at Whitewater, I transferred to UW-Madison as part of their help desk, which was kind of the official start of my IT career. After about 2 years on help desk, I transitioned into my architect position. After taking over the ticketing system, like Scott said, I am a very systematic thinker. My favorite part of my job is listening to the problems that people in my department are having with, janky processes or things that take 10 days and 200 people, but should really just be one email. And I like automating those things for them. I like solving problems. Puzzles are the best part of this job for me. And then finally, I'll hand it off to Todd.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Scott, for the introduction as well as convening this group. I think it's created a lot of good conversation internally, and hopefully it will be really helpful for the attendees as well. So again, my name is Todd Schwanke. I use he, him pronouns. I work at the McBurney Disability Resource Center, which is part of identity and inclusion within student affairs. I'm the Associate Director of Accommodations and Technology, and the team I work with manages various accommodations, including media captioning, live captioning, sign language interpreting, converting materials to alternative formats, note-taking accommodations, furniture accommodations, and a few other miscellaneous areas. I have technology in my working title, but I wouldn't say I have a typical IT job or that it's in my job description. Each of us has a little bit different work. I work primarily with student disability related accommodations and accessibility. I really have appreciated the increased use of the term IT adjacent. I feel that kind of fits me, but also I think I'm often in between end users and typical IT systems and personnel. Been at the McBurney Center a little over 15 years, and at UW-Madison for that same amount of time. When I started at the McBurney Center, we worked with about 800 students. Now we work with around 5,000, so we've seen tremendous growth during that time. I guess a little bit about my professional journey. I kind of work on two fronts. The first is making sure that students have what they need and have access to their education on a day-to-day basis. And then also working on the accessibility, so looking forward to make things better in the future. And I think I'll stop there and then save some additional information for some of the questions that will be coming.
Thank you, panelists. Thanks a lot. Lindsay, you ready for the hot seat? What is innovation?
So I think innovation for me has to be functional improvement. It's a bit of a buzzword. Everybody says innovation and they almost always mean something shiny, new. Tech companies love to talk about how they're innovating things, but unless it's functional, it's not really innovation. I always think of the Juicero as a great example of something that was called an innovation, but was actually worthless. An $800 cold pressed juicer that was Wi-Fi enabled. and required you to use proprietary juice pouches from the same company selling you the juicer. One 3-minute video from a journalist took what I think was $100 million investment to nothing, because you could just squeeze the juice out of the packets with your own hands. Innovation can't just be making something shiny or new or pretty. It has to actually improve either an existing process or something that never had a process and really needs it. Creating a process, creating an app to address a specific problem, automating a manual process, cleaning up complexities, all of these are innovation. And it's not just creating new. I want to emphasize that innovation is also improving what already exists. Some people look around at their job and say, I only, do these 5 things and it's the same 5 things and it's never going to change. You can still innovate within that position. There's always improvements to be made to the things that you do.
Todd, Parwat, Al, want to jump in on that?
I think based on what Lindsay said there at the end, because a lot of her thoughts reflected my thoughts as well, is that in my work, there's really been a shift to using or innovating around what already exists. So in assistive technology and accessibility, it's a fairly new field, and a lot of the initial work was coming up with brand new software, hardware, et cetera. Now it's a lot of looking at what's out there and seeing how it can be repurposed or optimized or customized. So I think that is a really important focus of new doesn't mean brand new. Sometimes it's tweaking, optimizing. And there's also an aspect of timing there of what is available.
Right. I wanted to bring out something as we discussed this, Todd, you mentioned how 10 years ago, you'd provide some solution that was good for a whole semester. And now things change so rapidly, you're finding you're innovating on a constant. Is there anything you want to add about that? The pace of innovation these days?
Yeah, that's a hard one, because sometimes it feels like things aren't moving fast enough. And then other times when you look back, things have changed really rapidly. I think an element right now is in our field that there's common ways of doing things, and we try to not just replicate what the common way of doing things is, and trying to look at what really benefits the user, and as well as us as workers to make things more efficient. And like I said, our numbers have really grown, and so you can't just keep doing things the way you used to, because it doesn't scale.
Right. Thanks. Parwat, Al, want to jump in?
I was going to add, I think, especially kind of off of what Todd talked about too, in terms of that pace. I mean, I think that a lot of innovation comes down to, just that initial, speed of initiative, right? Sort of the idea that each particular innovation, it doesn't have to be something necessarily new, but someone who's applying it in a new way and taking the lead on doing that. That in of itself is being an innovator. And I think that there's going to be a number of different examples you'll see throughout some of the things we may talk about here today, but you might see in your own activities for those in the audience about things that we could be doing and we're maybe not doing yet. And the question you have to ask yourself is why, and what do we need to do that? Does it require, leadership to support that? Does it require a conversation and buy-in? Does it just take someone getting started and just proving a proof of concept of what can actually support whatever the goals are of your particular group? So I think that initiative component is a big part of that. And I think especially makes a lot of sense with kind of what Todd talked about there.
Great. Thank you, Al. Parwat.
Yeah, I think most of the points that I had, all the panelists already talked about. And, I'll just be adding like a general overview of what I think an innovation is. And this is really, I will be saying the same thing that everyone has said in a slightly different way. And innovation to me is a centralization or a concentration of resources, which a group of people can easily access. Like Lindsay mentioned, the parts for innovation already exist. And innovation happens when thoughtful, dedicated people can get access to join these parts together, like building blocks, to create not necessarily something new, but something slightly different. I try to think about innovation in terms of like geological process, right? And when I say geology, I'm talking about really slow time, right? But in geology, there's also some events that happen pretty catastrophically. So you'll see that impact right away. So just thinking about like human evolution, it's like innovation that accumulated over time, over millions of years, right? We can kind of think about that in how we do our work. We may not see that impact right away, but small steps, small chip in the block will create something eventually. So I do think about innovation in terms of improving processes over time, which will lead to something new over time.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Any of you have a follow-up, or should we move on to the next question? All right, we'll move on. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to start off with Todd here. Todd, what advice do you have for technologists who'd like to successfully innovate more?
Sure. And as I wrote some of these things down, I think they feel kind of obvious, but I'll just kind of state what I think some of these things are. Listening and observing, seeking to understand and make sure you understand the problem that you're actually trying to solve. Draw connections and notice the patterns in those observations. View experiences from many perspectives or different perspectives, not just your own. You've probably all, had a technologist tell you, no, that can't be done, or we can't do that, or that's not possible. And oftentimes that may come from a perspective of that one individual. Sometimes you have to take a risk, or often you have to take a risk in looking at innovations, because change, as often talked about, change is hard, or there may be resistance to change, and so there's some risk there. I can't remember who mentioned already, but ask why, and understand the feedback that you get when you ask why. And as we've already talked about, don't always look for the hardest or fanciest solution. Sometimes it's the simplest one that can make the most difference.
So Todd, have there been some barriers to innovation that you've been able to work around that it might benefit our attendees to hear a little bit about? Some of the barriers you've overcome?
I think some of the barriers, I guess the way to answer this question is, I think we're getting to that point in the conversation right now. Especially, I don't want to spend too much time on my work specifically, but in the area of accessibility, with the numbers and the number of student accommodations, we have to start looking at how instruction is provided. And so figuring out, okay, what are the changes what changes can be made to instruction and how we provide instruction that helps us provide accommodations at scale or reduce the need for accommodations because it's already accessible.
Right. Thank you for that. Lindsay, I'm going to see if you have anything to add on to that.
Yeah, Todd mentioned this as kind of starting small. It doesn't have to be a big organization-wide change. Start with yourself. What about your job makes you miserable? What task do you have to do every single day that you would just really like to not do anymore? That's how I got started with automation. I was sending a template email out to every single person that onboarded with Department of Family Medicine. It was important. It had a bunch of tech information. This was during the pandemic, so it was stuff that we wouldn't be able to do in person, but was essential to know. And every single time I had to go into a Word document, copy out my email, find where I put my little placeholder variables, edit in their name and their new email address. And I was like, there has got to be a better way to do this. I didn't know what tools were available to me, so I fell back on kind of that foundational IT skill. I Googled it, and I found that there were a whole bunch of tools that I could use, in particular, Power Automate. The important thing is remember that whatever problem you're having, probably not as unique as you think it is. Someone somewhere out there on the planet is having a problem, if not the exact same one, very similar to yours, and they might have found a solution that you can adapt for yourself. You know, you don't have to start from brick and mortar and build the Coliseum alone. You can build on to what other people are creating.
Fantastic. Thank you. Al?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, to me, it's just it feels like the also like, you know, I don't think Lindsay has this problem, but the understanding too of like, is there something that's not allowing you to make this easier on yourself, whatever the task is, or whatever the thing you're wanting to address. And is it you, right? Is it you that's in the way? You know, if you thought like, oh, I can't do that. That's not a skill I have. I'm not a programmer or whatever, you know, whatever you might be in your role, but that's not really the case. Like as Lindsay pointed out, right? You could Google that. You might be surprised as to what tools are available to you, what you actually could do, because, you know, for example, I know I've seen Lindsay do really cool things within, you know, some of these, you know, lower code situations with Power Automate that I was just like, oh my gosh, I would want to implement that tomorrow with what we're doing, because we're doing that manually. And, you know, she just figured it out, had it all set up, and now it's like there's this great example of it. So there's a lot of different things like that I've you sort of come across. You kind of go, this isn't beyond me. I can do this sort of thing, and it makes a big difference. So I would just add, yeah, that and don't be afraid to try something new. You know, even if your job position says I'm doing this task, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't branch out. So
Nice. Thank you. Harwat?
Yeah, I certainly think collaboration is key. There are times when you might not be the only person that can do this, but you may need help from multiple people. And as everyone mentioned, you may need to reach out to people that have already done the work. So Googling is best. Sometimes I know campus has some great resources, one of them being community of practice. And I think there's a community of practice for IT folks and IT adjacent folks here on campus, if I'm not mistaken, which could be a great resource and a great platform for springboarding ideas that you may not have thought about, ways of solving problems that people have already figured out, which you can adapt to yourself. I think to make the most impact, we have to meet our audience where we are. So this involves talking to different people. And in my personal work, I have to do that on a daily basis, because we have to coordinate so many different things for interpretation, translation, or even computer training. Unless you can talk to other folks and at least get some ideas about what the problem is, then, like Al said, you might be stuck in a place where you don't know how to get out of. But sometimes you can find inspirations in unlikely sources.
Excellent. Thank you. And Al, thank you for that link that you supplied. Also, I'd just like to point out that there will be a single slided slide deck with links to resources, including communities of practice. So thank you. Let's move on to our third question. Al, in your view, what drives innovators and their responses to the problems their organizations encounter?
yeah, I think that, there's always a lot of the classic ones that come to mind, right? There's the scratching your own itch, as the term would go, or the phrase would go. There is the idea that there's a need that might be there that's very obvious. And I think that's just sort of like the upfront one. But I think that there's a whole bunch of additional adjacent sort of drivers to innovation within their space. You have the idea that you have to take on a particular task, or we're looking at how to be more efficient, right? I think we've all experienced, all of us in campus here has experienced that mode where sometimes the number of things that you're having to take on personally in your role is maybe increasing. And you might look at that and go, the very simple approach is simply, well, I just have to do more, go faster. But what else can you do that changes that amount of work into not being such a maybe a scenario of burnout for you? How can you make things easier on yourself? How can you be more efficient? So there's a number of things that sort of drive that level of innovation. And then there's other elements as well. I think you start to branch out eventually into things that we need to do that maybe we weren't doing before, doing more and taking more, in a sort of upfront progressive approach to how digital accessibility is being handled, maybe in your particular unit, and what you could take advantage of there to innovate, and how you can reach out to folks like Todd and figure out what you need to be doing more there to make sure that's properly addressed. I think there's a number of different avenues that you're going to find when you innovate, find innovation opportunities within your area. And there's just going to be a whole host of different sort of things that probably overlap in all those different categories. But I'd say that at the end of the day, I would say not wait for, someone above you organizationally, for example, to come forward with the thing that you should be doing. You need to, look at these sort of things yourself. And I think you can expect that there's going to be a request to do something more and different ways you can handle that. And I think that's just where a lot of this comes from. I feel like a lot of innovation on campus that I see, it comes a little bit more, it's more organic, more grassroots. It's a little bit more from the, how can we do a better job here? And I'd say hopefully in most respects, and if that's true for anyone here that, or not true for anyone here, that we should, work together to sort of figure that out, but to make sure that leadership sort of shows that support, appreciates that and figures out how they can best address and support someone who's willing to take initiative and do something more than what they were asked. So.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. So self-motivate is a part of it. Yeah. Parwat, follow up on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think, we are driven and innovators. And when we say we, I mean everyone that works at the university, because we're all solving problems on a day-to-day basis, right? Whether it be in our work, whether it be in our daily lives, we're making choices as we go along. And I think we're driven by our wishes to have a better system in place, which will ultimately, and as the UW's mission points out, improve the quality of life for all. And innovators are imaginers, and I think we all have the capacity to imagine. Oftentimes, those imaginations are informed through interactions with people, because if organizations encounter problems, the problems directly affect people. So people are the best indicators of, the problems that you can see in organizations. And if you can sit down and observe, or at least talk to people and see, how they verbally or non-verbally express their concerns and whisper a better way, then there might be something that clicks in your mind to kind of think about, oh, okay, I can do it in this way. Like Lindsay mentioned, how she kind of automated a lot of things that could have been automated way before, but there might not have been good resources for people to tap into. But Lindsay came in and was able to say, okay, we can just make it, create a solution in such a way that we can make our processes faster. And it's also why it is important to draw different minds to the drawing board to refine different sets of problems organizations may be facing.
Great, thank you. Todd.
Sure. I think for me, it's making sure to allocate time for innovation. We can really get caught up in our day-to-day work, and it does take time to do that. And so one of my, this is not an advertisement or a plug, but one of my favorite things each year is the showcase held at Union South. And a lot of the posters and presentations aren't, specific to my work. They don't directly relate to accessibility or accommodations. But as I go around and talk to different people, I both find out what they're doing in their work, but also it really, it motivates me, and it really, I've come away feeling a lot of creativity. And so I might see something that is like, oh, so-and-so is doing this project, and I could, leverage that, or I could do something similar. And so, but it takes time to do that away from your normal day-to-day work. So I would say, that conversation both with colleagues, talking to end users, sometimes issues or problems or they come to you, but oftentimes you have to seek them out. End users or teams don't always make their needs known, and so you have to make sure you're asking and searching out to identify where innovation is needed.
Wow, great. Hey, can someone supply a link to the showcase? I'd really appreciate that. It's not in my closing panel, so it'd be great to supply
Sure,
that.
I can do that.
All right, thank you. Lindsay.
Kind of building on what all three said, you really need to support a culture of creativity within your organization to foster any kind of change or growth. I've been really lucky in my career in that I have almost always had supervisors that were willing to do that for me. I'm going to shout him out because he's actually here, but my current supervisor, Nate Gullick, is fantastic with this, not just with me, but everybody else on our team. He recognizes our talents and he makes sure that we have time, not just to work on creative solutions, but also professional development. They really emphasize that at Family Medicine. It's fantastic. There's a trust there that not only can I do the work, but it's okay if I fail. Having that ability to try and the space to fail and not be terrified that it's going to come up in your performance review is really important. If you're a manager or you're a team lead and you're like, I don't have a lot of time to do these new things, but I'd really like my staff to be able to do that, make sure that it's obvious, be explicit, say, yes, I'm willing to let you guys try new things. If there's something that you're interested in or passionate about, even if it doesn't quite fit your job description, try it out. Come back with the results. I wouldn't be where I am if I hadn't been allowed to do that. Running the ticketing software was not a part of my original job description when I was first hired for the help desk. It was something that I said, look, this is a mess. I want to fix it. Let me fix it. And my boss said, fine. And now I'm here.
Wow. Very good. Very good. Thank you all. Okay, last question. Parwat. Innovation provides best value when it can be accessed by large numbers of people. So the question is, how do we make our innovations accessible to people representing different backgrounds and having differing sets of resources?
So this question plays right into my roles and the audience, the customers that I serve in my role and my colleagues as well. I think the first thing we can do is understand that UW is a huge, huge place. Not just in terms of numbers of students, but also in terms of numbers of faculty and staff and employees in general. And also understanding that it is also a diverse place. You know, people come from different backgrounds. And depending on our work, we may have certain assumptions about who our audience may be. But I think sometimes we have to kind of sit back and think about what kind of product or what kind of creations we're putting out there for people to use in UW, because because it's a public university, there's someone likely out there who's Googling a problem and will come across your solution. So sometimes you have to kind of sit back and think about, okay, what is the best way for me to provide opportunities for UW community? And it may not always be possible in the first draft, but if you get feedback from people saying that, hey, I wish it was this way, I wish this was translated, I wish this was accessible for people with hearing difficulties, then that's a chance for you to improve upon what you already have, the product you already have created. And maybe that's also a chance to have that conversation with that person who came up with that question or came up with that feedback.
Wow. Thank you. Todd.
Yeah, so I guess this is one, this is a focus for us and probably one of the bigger challenges we're looking at right now, both in terms of making sure things are accessible from a disability or accommodation perspective, but also in terms of technology being something that not everybody has automatic access to. There's some things that the university provides, and there's other things that students and others are expected to come with. And so, we can make innovations, but that doesn't mean that they're automatically available to everyone. We have to be careful not to make assumptions, and we need to, when we're doing our needs assessment, we need to make sure that we're taking, we're talking to everybody and including diverse populations and taking that into account as we're identifying solutions and implementations.
Great, thank you, Todd. Did you have more to add to that, Todd?
Nope.
No, okay, Lindsay?
Kind of along the lines of what Todd was saying about assumptions. Don't assume that your idea is inaccessible just by default. There are so many different use cases and applications for solutions that part of what you are building will help someone else. And the things that you're building are never so complicated that you can't explain it to someone else. Some of my best work is clutched together from pieces of other people's ideas that I took from Stack Overflow and just edited down until it was what I needed out of it. And it's a sort of a weakness, I think, of everybody in IT. Documentation is very important. You are not going to remember in 10 years what you built or why. So it's very important while you're building to write out what you're doing. I've been very bad with that, and I've made a conscious effort now to improve upon that. I do a lot of work in Power Automate, and there's both a notes and comments feature, and I use both of them liberally now on all of the flows that I build. So even if it seems obvious to me, I have it written out in comments, and somebody else can come along, look at what I build and say, you know what, I don't need this piece or this piece or this piece, but based on this comment, I know that I need this part and I can do something with it. The other thing I'll say is you can't make something accessible if you're the only person that has it. So make sure whatever you're building, talk about it, tell people. You don't have to go so far as to build a presentation, but like I think Parwat said with the communities of practice, tell people about it there. Just say, hey, I built this thing. Do you think that you could use it? I really like what I did. I want to talk about what I do. I'm like that with Jira. Anytime somebody anywhere on campus mentions Jira, it's like, I hear it and I want to be there because all I want to do is talk about the stuff that I've built so that I can help other people.
And that's kind of how we met.
Yeah.
Yeah. And back to your first point before we go to you, Al, I was working with a customer just yesterday, a manager for a particular small area, but very important and part of the regulatory compliance kind of things that we have to do here on campus. And because of COVID, there was a computer, absolutely vital, that no one had used for 2 years and no one had documented anything. And so this manager's coming to me for help trying to figure out what is this thing and what do I do with it? No one has logged onto it for 2 years. So yeah, documentation, absolutely key. And also thank you, Lindsay, for just the way you are is you kind of evangelize for the things you're excited about. And that's how you and I connected. So I really, really appreciate that. So let's go to Al.
So many great points already made here, and by Parwat, Todd, Lindsay. I think it's some of what I'd say is a little bit more of a yes and, but I think the thing I would just say is there's the most inaccessible products or tools are just the ones that are never built, right? That's the most inaccessible you can get. So if we're talking about, how we want to, make sure that there's an equal access to things and that we're making sure that we're cognizant of different cultures and inclusivity, as well as anyone who just has different resources, we have to talk about how we're going to be building these sort of things and just getting them in someone's hands to start to make improvements to them. Even if we just, get something out there and then you gain feedback on it, that's a huge part of this. I would also add that there's a huge element to, if you're looking for action items and how to do that sort of thing more specifically, back to some of what Parwat mentioned up front with some of the other questions and what Lindsay mentioned just recently, get involved with those community of practices. There's engagement, inclusive, and diversity, community of practices, sustainability and well-being. There's digital accessibility community of practices. And I'm a little bit biased because I tend to like to manage that one. But anyway, the long story short is I think you should really get involved there and take an initiative in how you're developing what you're developing. And it's going to make a big difference for somebody more than you might think at first. So please do.
And here's a +1 for those communities of practice. You're going to see me highlighting this again at the very closing remarks, but I had no idea how amazing this university was until I got involved with the planning committee for the leadership conference in December 2 years ago. I had no idea. I've worked here forever.
Yeah, and we're a decentralized campus, right? But it's amazing how much there's out there.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then, and the experience of working with you four for this panel. You guys were just constantly surprising me with your great ideas. So yeah, so circling back to one of Al's points just now, get involved. And the slide deck, it's got one PowerPoint slide. It's full of links to help all of us get more connected and get more involved. So Al, I didn't cut you off, right, Al? You were done. Right. So that was our last question. So let's go to Mernaz. Mernaz, do we have any questions from the audience?
We have some really good conversation going on in there. So we had Jeff Schuckler mentioned, like reiterated what Lindsay was saying, that we don't just innovate for just innovating, rather making things more efficient and things like that. And that's a really good point. Also, there was a comment from Mary, which it actually, I can relate to that. So I don't know if you can provide some feedback on that, but I'm going to read that. Mary mentioned, I need more connections, so I support the campus. I have been in my position for a year, feel siloed and don't know where and who to go and connect to. Love innovation, but it takes collaboration. I think we all can relate to that in a way.
Right. So Todd, I'm going to go to you first on that one. How to prevent feeling siloed.
Yeah, thanks, Mary, and that actually was one of the things I was going to respond to. I saw that earlier. One recommendation I would have would be to go to something in your area. So like the community of practices have been mentioned. Go to something like that you can kind of match up and go, I work in this area, there's this community of practice. But then also go to things that aren't directly in your area. So like the showcase, like I mentioned, it's not, for me, it's not a specifically accessibility or accommodation related, but it's going and talking to a lot of different people from different areas. And I think from there, you kind of get that discovery of connections that you wouldn't have anticipated. And that's where some of the ideas and innovation come from, because you don't go in with that preconception of who you're going to talk to or what you're going to talk about. You just kind of run across different people or different work that you didn't even know was out there.
+1 for that, Todd. Lindsay?
I'll just shout out IT Connects. There's a panel at 1 o'clock with a bunch of co-leads from different IT Connects groups. I'm one of the co-leads for the UW-IT mentoring program. We just wrapped up with our end of year celebration, but we will be running another program in the fall. There's the Women in Tech group, which actually connects with a wider Madison Women in Tech. So not just people at the university, but people from all over Madison, and we're a pretty big tech hub, so it's a pretty popular group. There's Leadership Improv, which Amanda Thornton and Jason Erdman run, and they are a lot of fun. Community, which is all online. It's a weekly, no obligation, drop-in Zoom meeting. I know one of the problems with being siloed is if you are literally located somewhere far away and alone or out of state. So there's also the Tech Partners group. I'm not actually sure how I found Tech Partners. I don't even know if it's posted somewhere, but it's a huge Microsoft team with a bunch of different IT people from across UW-Madison that covers a bunch of different topics, including just a general social chat as well. I don't know if Scott, you want to talk about this, but later on this month, there will be actually a program that the IT professionals group will be sponsoring. I think we settled on the name INT Coffee Connects. I built a couple solutions for them, but that will be kind of a informal one-on-one networking opportunity. I built a matchup randomizer in Power Automate for that group to use. So watch out for that. News will be coming, I believe, from the CIO office hours and possibly also in Tech News.
Wow, Lindsay, there was so much there that I can't wait to have the closed captioning put on so that people can actually, itemize what you were talking about, but totally +1,000 on that. It was amazing. Yeah, there's so much here. Yeah, and IT Connects, I'm going to highlight that at the end. Al?
I'll just say +1 to everything Lindsay said, of course. IT Connects is a fantastic suggestion among all the other things she mentioned, because it's a very central hub to things. And I think that there's a lot you can do, and getting involved in just any one of these groups is a great first start. It might feel a little overwhelming, but do that. And I'd say a little bit of an additional to that is that if you ever feel like maybe there's not as much in whatever area of focus you might have specifically on this campus, and also don't be afraid to check outside of campus and look at what else is out there. There's a lot with the online community, and you might be the first one to kick off the interest in a group that others are going to find that is something that they want to join.
Absolutely. Thank you, Al. Parwat?
I really don't have anything to add because,
Okay.
in my position, I'm more IT adjacent and I'm focusing a lot more on my two positions. So all of the things that Lindsay, Al, and Todd mentioned are also new to me. And I'm actually looking forward to the Tech Partners news coming up. Other than that, I know one thing about community practice is that if you don't see something exactly related to your trade or profession, then I think you can create one community of practice and invite folks to that. So,
Right. I add, I'm a help desk guy, right? So you've got my contact information. So if you feel siloed, you reach out to me. I can connect you to a lot of stuff. I've been on this campus forever. So, but as Lindsay pointed out, IT Connects really is the umbrella. I wanted to tag on to one of the things that Parwat said earlier. This campus is huge, right? So the folks who set up the Data Wonks community of practice were apparently, for some reason, not connected to IT Connects. Well, they are now. It's kind of a statement about how big this place is. So now Data Wonks is part of us, and that's a great resource if you're doing analytics. Mernaz, we've got about 6 minutes more. Do you have another question for us, or should we
There
wrap?
is actually one more question from Dave Luke. I'm gonna
yeah.
read it. Yeah.
I got it. I got this. I want to address this. Dave, thank you so much for bringing that up. The reason that this is the perfect question for this point in the program is that in December, these 4 panelists and I are going to be back at the leadership conference. And we're going to have a similar discussion, but it's going to be targeted to managers, supervisors, executives, directors. How do we clear the decks for our troopers so they can get innovating? So yeah, come back in December at the leadership conference, and these 4 people and I will be back, and we'll be addressing that question in particular. But I'm going to go over to Todd here and see if he has anything he wants to add about what management can do, since he is an associate director. Maybe he's got some ideas there, Dave.
Thanks, Scott. Great question and challenging one. I think mentioned earlier as far as making space or time for it, making it something that's intentionally considered. Also, for that, whatever mechanism you use to collect feedback, whether it's looking at help desk tickets, whether it's looking at or surveying people, having forums where people can attend and you can get feedback to identify what the needs are, to identify the pinch points, or what employees are voicing as far as like feeling that there's inefficiencies, creating that space where people feel that they can let leadership know what can be improved, and then that helps identify for the group or the team what might different people choose to work on, and what are the highest priorities in doing that.
Thank you, Todd. And Lindsay, I'm just going to +1 on something you said earlier about your supervisor, Nathan Gullick, was had enough foresight to deliberately put innovation time availability onto your and your colleagues' plates. It's now time to go to our closing remarks. So, well, away we go. See, I got to bring that up. Okay. First of all, thank you, panelists. As you can see, It's been a pleasure working alongside these four. They constantly were surprising me with their ideas and perspectives. A couple of notes. We're planning to reconvene this same panel at the INT Leadership Conference in December, but our focus for that panel will be helping leaders encourage innovators and innovation. Second, Mernaz, if you'd show that slide deck, please. For the slide, which will be available for download, I first want to thank CIO, whoops, I just went over my script. I first want to thank CIO Lois Brooks and CTO Todd Schechter for their support of IT Connects. IT Connects is amazing. If you want a one-stop shop for melting the silo that you find yourself in, IT Connects, the top left link there. Please view that page. There are tons of amazing opportunities for your growth right there. So please get involved. Second, please, a virtual round of applause for our panelists and Mernaz Jubanet, our moderator. They did a great job today, didn't they? And lastly, I want to thank you for questing to be an innovator. That's why we're here today. Thank you.
Okay, there are no more questions. There are many other great sessions. Please make sure to join them. And other than that, thank you very much, our panelists, and thanks, Scott, also. And have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you, Mernaz. Thank you all.